Hey everyone, I'm Evan and welcome back to Road Tripping with Royal Farms. Today we're diving into the dark and mysterious world at the Vampire and Paranormal Museum right here in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. So get ready for a fantastic journey as we explore the chilling history and spine-tingling exhibits at this one-of-a-kind museum. Let's sink our teeth into it.
Let's talk about the history of vampires and paranormal activity while we explore the Vamp Museum. So vampires. These blood-sucking creatures have been haunting our imaginations for centuries, but where did it all begin? Believe it or not, the idea of vampires goes way back to ancient times. In Mesopotamia, one of the earliest civilizations, they had stories about a female demon called Lilitu. She was bad news for pregnant women and babies, and some people think she might have been one of the first vampire-like creatures in mythology. The ancient Greeks weren't far behind with their own creepy stories. They had monsters called Empusa and Lamia who liked to drink the blood of young men. But the vampires we know today, they mostly came from Eastern European folklore, especially from countries like Romania, Hungary, and Serbia. Back in the day, people in these areas believed that corpses could rise from the grave and feast on the blood of the living. These vampires weren't handsome or sparkly like you might see in the movies today. They were described as bloated and reddish colored, basically very unattractive zombies with a thirst for blood. During the Middle Ages, vampire stories really took off in Europe. People started talking about revenants. That's a fancy word for corpses that can come back to life. Whenever there was a plague or something bad happened that people couldn't explain, they often blamed it on vampires. It was during this time that people came up with ways to deal with vampires. You've probably heard of some of these methods in movies, like stabbing them through the heart, burning them, or burying them at the crossroads. The idea was to make absolutely sure that the dead stayed dead. Now let's fast forward to the 18th century. This is when things get really wild in Eastern Europe. There was a huge vampire panic, kind of like the witch hunts you might have learned about. People were so scared of vampires that they actually conducted vampire hunts. They would dig up bodies and perform rituals to make sure the dead wouldn't rise again. But here's where it gets more interesting for us in the West. Scholars and travelers from Western Europe heard about these vampire stories and brought them back home. This sparked a fascination with vampires that would eventually lead to them becoming a big part of our pop culture. The 19th century is when vampires really became popular in literature. In 1819, a writer named John Polidori wrote a story called Vampire, spelled with a Y instead of an I, which was the first published modern vampire story. But the vampire book that everyone knows is Dracula by Bram Stoker, published in 1897. These books shaped a lot of what we think about vampires today: their aristocratic style, their ability to turn others into vampires, and their weaknesses like sunlight and religious symbols. Of course, vampires didn't stop evolving in the 19th century. In the 20th and 21st centuries, we've seen all kinds of vampires in books, movies, and TV shows. From the threatening vampires in Annie Rice's The Vampire Chronicles to the sparkly teenage heartthrobs in Stephanie Meyer's Twilight, vampires have become very versatile characters. They can represent forbidden love, the fear of death, or even the struggles with immortality. Now let's switch gears and talk about paranormal activity. When we say paranormal, we're talking about ghosts, spirits, and other supernatural stuff that science can't easily explain. Just like vampires, the belief in paranormal activity goes way back. Ancient civilizations all over the world believed in spirits that could influence the world of the living. In ancient Egypt, for example, belief in the afterlife was super important. They thought that when people died, they continued to exist in a spiritual world. Hey folks, if you're enjoying this ghostly adventure, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss out on any future episodes. Okay, back to some haunted history. During the Middle Ages, beliefs in the paranormal got mixed up with religious ideas. The Catholic Church taught about purgatory, a place where souls went after death to be purified before entering heaven. This led to widespread beliefs in ghosts and hauntings. People thought that spirits might come back to ask for prayers or to settle unfinished business. The 16th and 17th century saw a lot of witch hunts and trials. People accused of witchcraft were often thought to be working with demons or evil spirits. It was a scary time to be different or misunderstood. During this period, ghost stories also became really popular, especially in England. People would gather on long winter nights to share spooky tales. The 19th century brought us something called Spiritualism. This was a religious movement based on the idea that we could communicate with the dead through people called mediums. Seances became popular. These were gatherings where people would try to contact spirits. Some people even tried to photograph ghosts. This is also when people started trying to scientifically study paranormal activity. They investigated things like poltergeist, apparitions, and haunted houses. Of course, there were always skeptics who challenged these investigations. Have you ever seen a ghost or been in contact with a spirit? Let me know in the comments. In the 20th and 21st century, we've seen a rise of parapsychology, the scientific study of paranormal phenomena. Even though most scientists are still skeptical of the existence of ghosts and other paranormal activity, it remains a popular topic in our culture. Just think about all the movies, TV shows, and books about the paranormal. Series and films like The X-Files, Ghostbusters, and The Sixth Sense have had a huge impact on how we think about the supernatural today. So how does all of this history tie into the museum we're touring today in Doylestown? Well, the Vampire and Paranormal Museum is a place where all these stories and beliefs come together. They have exhibits that showcase vampire folklore from different cultures and time periods, and you can see how the image of the vampire has changed over time. They also have a collection of objects that are tied to paranormal activity and unexplained phenomena. This museum isn't just about scaring people, it's about exploring how supernatural beliefs have shaped human history and culture. Now, the Vampire and Paranormal Museum is a relatively new addition to Doylestown, but it's quickly become a popular spot for both locals and tourists. Whether you're a true believer in vampires and ghosts, or just someone who enjoys a good spooky story, there's something here for everyone. Their exhibits blend history, folklore, and entertainment to create a unique experience.
Well, folks, that concludes our tour of the Vampire and Paranormal Museum here in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the unknown as much as I did. Remember, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss an adventure. And a special thank you to Royal Farms for keeping us fueled up on our eerie adventures. Until next time, stay curious, stay spooky, and keep exploring the haunted corners of history. See you in the next video.